talk would be a little bit a special one, especially for me, because it's the first one that I'm, hosting in English. So thank you so much for your very kind listening. So we are here for the Women&Design Innovation Awards, which is a new award from Maison&Objet. This year, we had quite a dynamic discussion in the jury, and we have two winners. First one is Elaine, which is the founder of the Fabrick Lab, which is working about textile, as you can see on her, this beautiful jacket. We dream, all of us, about it. The second one is Sophie Salager, which is the CEO of Manufacture de Couleuvre, which is a very famous and old manufacturer of ceramics in France. And we have on the stage with us Julien Sebban, who is architect, very famous architect, very, very original architect, and member of the jury. So the idea of this award was about the woman, of course, and about the future of design. How to imagine the next step, how to imagine the future. The different ladies were entrepreneurs, artists, designers, and the idea for Maison&Objet is to spotlight female talents in international design through this new awards. So, both of you, Elaine and Sophie, could you briefly tell us about your backgrounds and why do you choose to express yourself through design at the broadest sense?
Hi everyone, I'm Elaine, traveling from Hong Kong. So my background is quite complicated actually. I started my journey as a traditional weaver, trained from London, Central St. Martin's, and thinking I'll be a craft maker, and that was it. But when I was starting my journey in textiles, I discovered actually there's a lot of engineering and maths involved to be a weaver, which I've never really encountered. And then my first job was hired as a concept car color material designer. So then I realized textiles is really beyond just garment and interiors. It could be really in sort of lifestyles application. And that really opened up a lot of the spectrum of the cross-disciplinary approach, which starts my journey and why I wanted to do something different. And then the industry brought me in as a consumer electronics specialist in injection molding, which has nothing to do with textiles. That also showcased the knowledge of design can be so broad that doesn't need to be stick with your own industry. I think that's sort of a quick intro of my background before I start my studio.
And you, Sophie?
Well, actually, I started my career pretty early with the objects. I studied history and art history at the university, and then I worked at the Château de Versailles and then Christie's. So since the beginning, I used to be surrounded by objects and design, and I've always been passionate about materials and how objects were made. So for me, it was just quite obvious to buy the Manufacture de Couleuvre 4 years ago. And so that's it. Basically, the whole career is objects and design.
Okay, when we hear you, it seems very simple, in fact. The very specific point is that both of you choose to become an entrepreneur. You, Elaine, it was by starting this Fabrick studio. Why did you begin this kind of adventure?
Pure from being naive, you never start a studio if you know too much. So I was young and not knowing how much trouble I could get into. On the seriousness, it was when I was working for corporates, you get so much resources. You can work with factories and prototypes because it's not out of your own pocket. And then when you're being individual designers, you realize it's really expensive to do any prototyping with factories, and they never take you seriously because you're not those big brand names. And then most importantly, there's so much wastage when we sample fabrics. You can only sample anything at minimum of 100 meters or yards. So 99% of it goes into waste. And I found that quite disappointing as an individual designer at the beginning. And then I started researching in Guizhou and the mountain villages in China in 2012. Then I discovered, actually, if we go back to basic, you can put anything by your hand into the loom. And why don't we have the accessibility to do so? Philippines weavers do that all the time, but then that gave me the idea of a much more streamlined way to set up a studio that can combine prototyping machines that can calibrate with factories and also handmade.
And now you are able to produce or to imagine products that doesn't exist for the moment?
I would like to think so, because I'm a very silly designer in a way. Every year I invest into a new machine for the studio. So we have Gerkens prototyping loom, we have got hand loom, digital loom, 3D printers, and normal sewing machines and heat press steamers. So we have a range that allows us to speak the language to the factories and also craft makers.
And to try different type of textile with different type of fibers too, because you're working with all the traditional fibers and some very specific ones, for example, a lot of metals. And
so when we start a discussion with a client, usually we would go by, we don't talk about yarn, we don't talk about textiles, we talk about story, narratives, and where you want your material comes from and the relevance to their brand. Then we can discover whether we want it through laminating, molding, or we spin our own yarn. Because when we start with the conversations of how the materiality comes in, we already start the limitation.
you, Sophie, why did you decide to buy Manufacture de Couleuvre? Is it because you wanted to have an entrepreneur adventure, or is it because Manufacture de Couleuvre, it was like a coup de foudre?
Well, a bit of everything. Actually, I started my first company when I was 28 years old, so it was not my first company. At this time, everybody was telling me, you're crazy, you're too young, you're not experienced, it's going to be a nightmare. It was not. And I think that...
What was your first company?
It was a gallery, photography gallery in the Marais in Paris. And so I had this company, and actually I had a project with one of the artists I was working on, and he was willing to work on ceramics. And I just love ceramics since I'm like 10 years old. And so just speaking about this project to friends, at some point, one told me, oh, you know what, I've seen that there is a very old company that is to buy at the moment, so you should have a look. And I was like, yeah, okay, why not? And not really interested, and also at this moment, I was just checking where it was, and it was really in the center of France, so I was like, it's going to be quite complicated. But then I did it, because I was just wondering what it was, because it was not really in Limoges, it was near from Limoges, so not in the center of the porcelain factory in France. And so I called the mayor, actually, of the city where the fabric was. And he told me the first time, sorry, I'm hunting. Can you call me back tomorrow? I was like, okay.
That's so French.
I know. So you really needed to have a lot of energy, you know, to go there. And so I called him back the day after, and he just started to explain the history of the fabric. And so I was just listening, and then at some point he told me, you know, it's such a shame because it's such a massive history. It's from the 18th century. And I was like, what, 18th century? And I don't know the name of this fabric. And so I started, you know, to pinch me. I'm like, okay, I need to go. And so at this point, I said, okay, I need to take the train. It's a 3-hour train to go there. So it's quite a trip. And then I saw the manufacturer, and actually it was really good food, as you said, because real crush. You need to imagine a massive fabric with more than 300,000 molds, which is like one of the biggest collection in France that you can have. And so I said, okay, I need to go. And so at this point, it wasn't the businesswoman that was speaking, it was really like the little girl just in front of this saying, there is so much to do and I'm just crazy enough to do it. And it was just the right time also for me to do it because I was 40 years old and after 10 years, being an entrepreneur, I said, okay, it's time for me. I can feel that it's the right time and the right project for me, so I need to go, even if it's just crazy.
What did you start with? Because with such a big manufacturing company, what do you start by doing? Because I'm a real huge fan of what you've done because taking such a big challenge is extremely impressive with the society that we live in. So for me, it's just like when you arrive at the factory, by what do you start doing?
It's a good question. It took me actually 1 year to decide what I wanted to do because there were so many possibilities, and because I wanted to respect the history of the manufacturer, but also to transform it and to bring it to the future. So, and because I studied art history, so it was really like important for me to respect that. So I don't know. I just tried. I drew a lot. I started to make a collection, and I was picking some ancient pieces and then bringing back some new one. And at some point, you just draw the right line. So each collection, it's always coming from the past because I always have a little tiny piece that is coming from the antique collections, but also I try to bring it back to new use, of pieces and of objects and of porcelain. And so this is how I'm trying to do it. But it's really a thin line.
It's another very interesting thing. It's that both of you, you are working on very, how to say that, historical craftsmanship. And in the same times, you are working by creating new pieces. And more than that, a little bit as lab for companies or for so how did you manage to organize that, to be renowned as very specific lab where it's possible to develop things that doesn't exist for the moment?
Actually, this question's been asked recently at another talk that I've been giving. A lot of people been asking about like the craft and technology side of things, how the relevance it is. In fact, actually, for craft, we really have to understand the fundamental how it works and became nowadays in order to actually to innovate, because we can't just create the machines, and all the machines is helping us to progress faster in speed to make it more precise. But then without the knowledge of history, we couldn't actually invent those machines, right? So it's a chicken and egg situation, and we need to keep the relationship really close and not to forget about where we've arrived and how we've arrived. That's why for me to travel all to the mountain villages to meet the ethnic minorities in like different countries in Southeast Asia is really important, because when I was learning as a weaver, I was learning from a very engineering perspective. How do we set up a loom? How do we calculate the yarns and all that? But then when I travel to the village, then I realized actually it's head to heart. It's generation histories of families, values, and culture. It's nothing to do with maths. If you ask them to change a very traditional motifs or pattern, it takes 2 years to explain to them why it is worth them changing. I mean, that's by my experience.
It's the same for me. It's so funny. Well, actually, for us, it's always difficult to combine craftsmanship and innovation, because you always want to innovate, but of course we have 14 steps in the making, in the process of doing ceramics, and at each step it's always the hand that is working and speaking. So I don't know if it was a real idea that I had to create some kind of lab, you know, for other companies to be able to work with us and to try new stuff. It's maybe because I'm just thinking that way, you know, so I'm just always trying challenging things and crazy enough to say yes to a lot of projects, you know, because I remember at the beginning some designers were coming at the manufacturer telling me, I'm so sorry, but nobody wants to take the project, it's just too difficult, do you want to have a look? And I was like, okay, let's do it. And so I just wanted to change it. And of course, at the beginning, you just go to the manufacturer and all the craftsmen were just looking at me saying, it's not possible. And I was like, yeah, I know it's not possible. I'm not saying that it is possible, but can we try? And that was just the starting point of everything. And now they are still always doing, it's not possible, but we're always trying, so sometimes it works.
I had a question also for Elaine, because I'm a young designer as well, and I'm just wondering, how did you turn all of your studies and everything that you've learned into a real business? Because as we're at this fair, there is also a young generation that I'm part of, and I think it's always interesting to really also understand how do you change, because you're doing amazing researches, you're doing all of this incredible work by meeting all of those people, trying to understand how you can weave in a different way. But how did you manage to really turn all of that work into a business?
A real business.
Yeah.
Sounds quite impossible, right?
It seems that, I mean, you've
Not
really
that
done
easy.
it.
Not that
No,
easy.
I'm sure it's not easy, but it's like just even in a few words, how do you, because research is an amazing tool, but how do you really turn that into a business?
Thank you for that question. Actually, this year's our studio 10th year anniversary, so I've survived for 10 years, so kind of made it. So, I mean, it's a really good question because right at the beginning, I didn't want to settle with a very traditional being just a weaver or just being a graphic designer where you can actually get paid instantly. But then I see a lot more value from what I'm really passionate about. So taking a really good example of like the fabric that I'm wearing now, is woven, it's actually knitted with paper. So we've spent, and the collection actually has been inspired from right at the beginning of the project when everything has to be, so what if you see on the screen now, this is hand-woven Gerkens paper 6 years ago in my lab. And at that point, those paper cannot be machine made. So it took me accumulatively 6-7 years of experiments to get the data, and then being really persuasive to different factories to test out and keep looking at new yarns and technologies, what type of coating that we can use, how can we change the program to accommodate that. So at the end, I actually switched the manufacturing industry. So I'm trained as a weaver, but my new collection is launched in knit. So it's really to understand, can we translate that so that it can be commercialized, adaptable, not to close the doors as such. I think that was one of the key turning point for me. It took so long to find the right window to commercialize in order for architects and interior designers to spec the work. That was my bottleneck a couple of years ago, and I was really trying hard. How do we relook at the research, and how do we adapt that? So technology is actually really important in our business and bespoke, because you really need to know how to program.
You, Julien, as a decorator, architect, interior architect, and so on, it's important for you that some small companies as theirs could be kind of place where your imagination become reality.
Completely. I mean, for me personally, it's a dream that that kind of company really exists, because as architects, you only draw on papers or on the computer, but you're not the actual one making things. So when I meet two talents like you guys, it really gives us not only ideas, but also like you allow us to have our dreams to become really reality, and then to be able to sell our pieces into places like Maison&Objet. So for us, without companies like yours and studio like yours, we couldn't really do our jobs. So I think like when we saw and we met all of these incredible talents, and we understood the work that you were doing, it was really amazing that for you, that you started this company. I mean, you took over this company 4 years ago. It's like, if you wouldn't have taken over this company, maybe it would have died, and like years, hundreds of years of history would have died with it. So for me, it's fascinating to also understand how you can really have the idea to take over those companies, because it's a huge challenge, and then to make it a profitable business and to be able to collaborate with so many designers as you're doing is amazing. So thank you for the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you.
You are, both of you are women. Is it special to be a woman in the world of design and business? And what are the main challenges you have to face in your professional careers?
I don't know if difficult is the real term, but it's a bit of a challenge still. It's a challenge because, well, I'm working with craftsmen at the manufacturer, and so when you arrive, people are always asking you, what are you doing? Like communication, marketing? I'm like, no, I'm CEO. Like, okay, but what do you do? I'm just owning the company, you know, trying to run and everything. And so it's always a bit frustrating at the beginning. And so in the manufacturer, sometimes it's challenging to convince them to go further, to try to give the best, because they are always willing to put you in some form of I don't know how to say that, but it's okay, it's going to be okay, and I don't need to push myself. And if I say too much to her, she's going to cry at some point. Well, it's too much by saying that, but in a way, it is like that. And also, it's sometimes changing with your clients, because at the same thing that just you're really owning the company, and how is it with the financial stuff and everything? I'm just trying to do everything. And so, yeah, sometimes it's just some ideas that are a bit everywhere in meetings, but at the end, I'm just trying to focus on what is the most important, and trying to make the best out of our team, and just try to improve everything. And for me, it's just leave everything outside. That's it.
And for you, Elaine, being a woman, is it changing anything, or do you have the feeling it's changing things?
I always have difficulty to answer that question, because I feel I was born in an incredible lucky time of our life. You know, we got a lot of time in terms of education is equal opportunity, with a lot of the weavers in mountain villages that I've came across in China. They didn't have the opportunity to have the educations and being respected. So a lot of the program we're trying to do is to champion for them in that respect. So I think being a woman, we do have advantage of that, because we were speaking for sort of like a femininity. But recently, I have a 2.5-year-old son. My roles has changed being a mother. So most of the time when I go to the meetings, like, how's your son? You know, I think there's certain expectations of like you should spend a certain amount of time with the child. So I think the sort of unspoken guilt are there, but actually there's so many amazing mom entrepreneurs out there as role models. So I think I'm hoping to people to sort of understand when we come to work, we are professionals and we're good with our timings.
Do you think that one of the secret of a booming, or even just best wealth company, is to how to say that, really mix technology, innovation, and traditional skills? Being just traditional is not enough, perhaps.
Well, I won't say that. I think that being traditional is quite okay. Actually, you can run your business with being traditional. I mean, the porcelain, the making of the porcelain is the same since 250 years in France and even more in Asia. So tradition is quite okay. Craftsman is perfect. And for me, innovation is just a way of enhancing the creativity. You know, it's not a matter of challenging innovation in opposite to craftsmanship or it's really like a similar stuff. It's just different tools that you can use to enhance your creativity and enhance your collection and what you want to do. So you don't have to opposite one to the other, and the opposite you can just do. It's better for your hand, and it's also the technology is also better for you and for your expression and for your creativity. So I don't want to oppose it.
I think for me, it's sort of more of you need to identify your market and your audience. So I think it goes both ways. Like if your audience are just purely looking for the heritage and the craft, then stick with it and you finesse, and that's fantastic. But for a lot of my clients, we work in consultancy and look into how do we integrate technologies and craft together, is to look into extra edge. For example, for garment manufacturing, like there's a lot of AI technologies also involved in designing as well, to create a more competitive edge. So I think, and also for clients who want handmade, but they want to have precisions, then where technology comes in is very useful as well. So it goes both ways, depends on the scale of the business.
I had a question for both of you. What dream would you like to achieve with your companies? What is, I mean, for you, moreover, Sophie, like what do you want to achieve with this company? And you, Elaine, you've done it for a little bit longer as well, but I would love to know, like, what would you like to do with your practice?
I mean, this is our 10th year, and I actually feel this is our real first year to able to be really confidently to speak with architects and property developers. It's always been our dream to really integrate our materials and knowledge into real space and lifestyles in scale. Whether it's a bespoke project or not, it's really to create this cross-disciplinary approach to create a real sense of community in design thinking. It's not an end product that I'm always really sort of envisioning arriving to, but it's more of like a new conversation at the end.
No, for me, it's a good question, actually. I'm a kind of a day-to-day person. So actually, I feel like I'm not deciding, you know, for the manufacturer what it's going to be like in 10 years. I feel like it's already so old. So I'm just the girl, you know, at some point in this manufacturer, and I'm not really deciding what's going to be the fate of the place. But what would make me happy, if that's kind of a question, is to make the manufacturer a place where you can have artists, designer, and craftsmen, and also brands and people just like us, you know, coming and just finding objects that you can feel that have history in the process, in the making, but also in the material. And if you want to express yourself, you can come in the manufacturer and try to find your way in it.
I've put my hands up for it.
Me too. If it's an invite, I'm coming.
Love to.
How did you feel when you received this Women&Design Innovation Award?
Very grateful, because actually I couldn't believe it. No, really, I was like, because there were so many wonderful women there, and so I was really moved, because it's a beautiful work, but it's also a very hard one. It's not easy every day, and so sometimes when you just get to have some prizes like this, it's like, okay, it's worth it at some point.
Same for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real surprise because everyone who got shortlisted was amazing entrepreneur. But being designing in Asia, in particular, I think it's really uplifting to be able to be seen on international stage. Especially my studio is a very different experimental, and being recognized as a business, that is even more important for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, we'll receive on stage Mr. Philippe Delhomme, which is the CEO of Maison&Objet.